Hello and Assalamu alaikum. I am Kashif Kamran and I welcome you to the day one of the Advanced Audit and Assurance Practice to Pass webinar for December 2019 examination being organized by ACCA Pakistan. Now, just before I roll the December 2019 webinar, I would like to formally introduce myself. In terms of my tutor profile, I am Kashif Kamran, a fellow chartered certified accountant, and it's almost been 13 plus year since I am teaching the ACCA qualification. I am currently associated with the Tabani School of Accountancy, which is a platinum approved learning provider of ACCA in Karachi, Pakistan. My core papers is the Advanced Audit and Assurance and the Strategic Business Leader paper. Now it's been almost, this is almost my eighth AAA Practice to Pass session I am conducting, which is organized by ACCA Pakistan. And I started this journey from the March 2018 webinar, and it's been consistently now down to December 2019 webinar. My students associated with me for AAA at several instances have attained nationwide positions and global positions in the AAA exams, and particularly in the September 2019 results, which has been a phenomenal results in September 2019, where even the global pass rate has increased from 31% to 36%, but my passing rate at the Bani School of Accountancy was almost 65%. So overall, the result was very good, and perhaps the student is getting the message, or the message is disseminating among the student that how they should be passing the AAA paper. And that's exactly what I will be doing into the session today. My students in the September 2019 results have attained a nationwide position from Pakistan and from Saudi Arabia. So I try to bring the best of my experience, which is almost a 13 years experience in the AAA paper, to try to assure that I bring you closer to success in the December 2019 exams. So let's start on with the day one of this Practice to Pass webinar for December 2019 exams. If I first look at the agenda, so all of you can prepare yourself for over the next 5 days for exactly what's inside this Practice to Pass webinar. Now, I have formulated this Practice to Pass webinar very differently. And probably the reason for that is that over the past many webinars I have conducted, I have been focused on core areas. I've been more focused on risk, and I've been more focused on evidence, and I've been more focused on procedures, more focused on ethical and professional issues, more focused on other assignments and reporting. So I thought at this time, because I've been going on a very consistent track, and the good thing is that you have the ACCA Pakistan library on Vimeo, which I will be showing you, and all the previous webinars are there for you to access and get knowledge. So I thought, let's do this webinar in a very different manner, and let's focus on those areas in this webinar which has not been touched upon in the previous webinar. So for that reason, I have kept the day one of this webinar and the day two of this webinar, particularly for the question number one. So that's almost 3 hours today and another 3 hours tomorrow, which will be spent on the question number one of the AAA paper. And perhaps all of you must be knowing how important and how significant the question number one is when it comes to success in the AAA exam paper. Then on the day three, I will be doing the question number two. And then on the day four, I will be doing the question number three. Then on the fifth and the final day, I'll be doing the knowledge questions, the recent articles, and the marking insight by the examining team. The knowledge questions do play a crucial part, and we have seen that examining team or the examiner is testing knowledge which is within the AAA syllabus. So if a student gets to the exam hall uh, unprepared on the knowledge area, uh, you might struggle. So it's very important that on the day 5 we focus on the knowledge questions which have come in the recent past papers, just to read the mind of the examiner. Along with that, I will be doing the recent article, which is basically the data analytics, and it's quite potential for exams in December 19. And I need to spend a good time on that article. And more importantly, the document which is published by the ACCA examining team, which is basically the marking insights by the examining team, will also be explored, so that you have an idea what your examiner expects from you and how your examining team gives you 1 mark, or how your examining teams gives you 1.5 mark. So you need to read the mind of your examining team. So that's all what we will be doing on the fifth and the final day. So that's quite a comprehensive agenda, which is spread on the next 15 hours, or which is spread on the next 5 days. And each day is utmost important. And I would prefer that all of you are concentrating on each of these 5 days, because on each day you will be learning something and you will be getting some valuable insights which can really help you meet the barrier of 50 and even exceeding the barrier of 50 in the AAA exams. Now, I'll be emphasizing again and again today over the revised format of this Practice to Pass webinar I am doing for December 19, revised in terms of my previous webinars I have been conducting consistently for AAA. So let's go down and let's start on with the proceedings. The objective of this Practice to Pass webinar is very important. And the purpose of this Practice to Pass webinar, which is being organized by ACCA Pakistan, is to facilitate students and is to help students achieving success in their exams. And being a tutor for AAA, my core purpose here is to give you the best possible knowledge over the next 15 hours, which can really bring you closer towards achieving a pass standard in the AAA exams. So the objective is to practice, and the objective is to enable you being successful in the upcoming exams. Now, just before I start off with the agenda items, it's very important for all the attendees who are taking this live session to know the pass rates and to know what has been a trend in the pass rates of the AAA exams. Now, if you explore these pass rates from the March 18 exam sitting, and you see this graph in front of your screen, you can see this blue bar, which is the last results announced by ACCA in September 19. And the very good thing was that in the September 19 exams, the AAA passing rate after like 14 exam sittings have achieved a 36% barrier. Okay, well, welcome back. We were discussing that the passing rates have improved a lot in the last results announced for September 19, and it has now achieved a barrier of 36%, which is a remarkable passing rate. And this distinction has been achieved after 14 exam sittings. We've never seen the AAA passing rates touching the 36%, and this is a very important feat which has been achieved after 14 exam sitting. So you can imagine how tough the AAA paper had been, and it's still tough. The only thing is that there has been an increment in the passing rate from the last exam sitting to this exam sitting. You can just visualize that here, that it was 31% in the June 19 exam sitting, and it's now 36% in the September 19 exam sitting. So there has been a remarkable increment of 5% more students passing than from the last sitting in June 2019. So I think that brings the positivity even, and that also brings a challenge in front of us, that even though the passing rates have improved, but they should maintain, and for the passing rates to maintain, your efforts are very important. And if all of you starts to get on the right track, and all of you starts to prepare on the right uh, track for the AAA paper, then obviously getting success is not difficult. But you need to understand the challenges of the AAA paper. You need to understand the problems with the AAA paper. You need to have a very constructive view of the AAA paper. You cannot just go down in the exam hall with a very optimistic version of the AAA paper. You need to know the concerns of the examiner. You need to know the issues raised by the examiner. You need to know the feedback of the examiner very productively. Then only you can have a very constructive picture of AAA, which can enable you to pass in your upcoming exams. So let's start down with the further analysis. The top 5 reasons to me, which I have analyzed and researched, why student keeps failing into the AAA paper. Uh, for the first reason, it's improper time spent on planning and answer, weak planning, and I'll be discussing that in more details today. I believe that the student do not allocate the reading and planning time and the writing time in a very proper manner. And I'll be doing an exercise on that with all of you to assure that how important is to allocate the reading and planning time and the writing time. Because a lot of time the student have no idea how much time they should be spending on reading and planning, and then how much time should ideally be going down into the writing of the paper. So there is an improper time spent, which really is a matter of concern, because with that improper time spent, what can really happen is that the students might not be completing the paper, and that has been a biggest concern, right? There are so many students at a global level which gives the feedback that they were unable to complete the 100% paper. And if that is an issue, then obviously if you're not completing 100% of your paper, then essentially getting to success will be very, very difficult. Failing to understand the requirement, that is another very important thing, because a lot of time the students don't even understand what is the examiner asking, or they rush to conclusions. They just read the requirement in a rush, or they read a requirement in such a quick go that they fail to understand the importance of the requirement, or they fail to understand exactly how many things the examiner is asking within the requirement. Now, these all have to be demonstrated over the next 15 hours, because these are reasons why students keep failing in the triple exam. So failing to understand the requirement is a very important reason, and you will realize over the next 15 hours that how crucial and how important is to read the requirements. Then number three, not adapting. That is such a big problem. I've seen so many students, I've seen scripts of so many students that they don't adapt things to the case study. They're just writing a generic answer. They're not writing an answer which is specific to a case study. They're not writing an answer which is linked to a case study. They're just writing the generic book knowledge, or they're just writing the knowledge which they have in their mindset when they enter the exam hall. But they're not trying to connect the knowledge which with the case study, with something very specific in the case study, and that's where the problem starts to come in. So if you are not adapting yourself in the exam context, and you're not adapting to your to the circumstances given by the examiner, then eventually you will be struggling to take the pass standard. So that's the number three reason, right? Then the number fourth reason is lack of reading or no reading of the examiner reports. If you don't read the examiner report, how will you be meeting the expectation of the examiner? You will be far away from the expectation of the examiner. The student and the examiner, there is such a big gap. And the only way you can bridge the gap, and the only way you can reduce the gap, is by reading the examiner reports. Because if you are unaware of the examiner expectations, and you have no idea of the examiner expectations, and you enter the exam hall and you start to do the paper, and you come happily out of the exam hall, but perhaps that is the satisfaction which you are getting as a student, but you have failed to satisfy the expectation of your examiner. So I am again encouraging you that you have a month, download the examiner reports, read the examiner reports. That is such an important resource which the students again and again are missing, even those students who are repeating the AAA paper. Because I believe the audience or the attendees of this webinar is a very diversified audience. Some of you might be going for the first time into the AAA exam, and some of you might even be repeating it. Irrespective of that, it's very important that you read the examiner report. So I'll be encouraging them, and I'll be demonstrating how you should be reading them over my session over the days. The last thing, marking scheme, know or blur idea. I've seen students that they reach the exam hall and they have no idea of the marking scheme. They have no idea that should they be taking 1 mark, or should they be taking 2 marks, or should they be taking 3 marks. They have no idea of the examiner marking scheme. So look at these 5 reasons, and try to relate these 5 reasons with yourself. Do a self analysis, and do a very constructive self analysis, particularly those students who are repeating this AAA paper. Improper time spent, failing to understand the requirement, not adapting to the circumstances, lack of reading of the examiner report, or no reading of the examiner report, and then having no idea or a very blur idea of the marking schemes. So if you overcome these 5 top reasons why a student fails the AAA exam, you have a fair chance of success in the upcoming exams. And if you keep doing these reasons in your December 19 exams, then obviously the result will remain the same. So you need to become honest to yourself. You need to become dedicated. You need to be on the right track, and you need to find a way through which you can overcome the reasons of student failing the triple exams. So I hope you will do efforts on these top 5 reasons, and you will find ways over the next 15 hours of this webinar that how you will be overcoming these reasons. Practice of the past papers, such an important thing. Practice is the key factor of AAA success. The more you practice, the better you are. The time you spend in gaining knowledge, and the time you spend in practicing past paper, the valuable time is practicing of the past paper. the more time you spend on practicing the past paper, and the more time you spend on practicing the logical past papers, you are you are having a fair chance of success. See this flow chart in front of your screen. It shows you which past papers you should be doing. You should be starting from 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, and 2019. You should be doing these past papers because these are recent past papers, and you need to make a habit of doing the recent past papers, because if you are doing the recent past papers, that's very good, because you know exactly what is going in the examiner mind recently. But if you start to do the older exam papers like 2011 and 2012 and 2013, you're not preparing yourself effectively for 2019 exams. So you need to make a habit of doing the recent papers, and see that in front of your screen. You need to do the December 2015 paper, you need to do the June and December 2016 paper, you need to do the June and December 2017 paper, you need to do the June and December 2018 paper and the June 2019 paper. And that's a very good preparation. But when I say do them, I mean you need to write them, you need to practice them. You need to maintain a proper register, and in that proper register you need to write the answers, the full answers, because that will give you the temperament of the exam. That will give you so much knowledge. You will come across so difficult questions and you will overcome them. But if that difficult question has been overlooked and you enter the exam hall and you get an identical difficult question, then what will you do? So it's better to prepare yourself for the difficult questions, and it's better to see the recent papers, right? Because the practice you will do over the next 4 weeks will mitigate the risk of writing an improper answer on the 2nd of December when you have your exam paper. So practice the recent papers, right? Recent papers have to be practiced. That is a very important message, right? And I hope all of you are taking that note very carefully. Examiner reports. Download the examiner reports. Again, the recent examiner reports of the same exam sitting: 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, and 2019. Whichever exam paper you are doing, you should have the examiner report of that paper with you. And when you do the answer, read the examiner report and see what the examiner has criticized you. See this do's and don'ts. I prefer that you have two color markers with you, one red, one green, and you start to read the examiner report. And while you're reading the examiner report, in the examiner report, you will get some criticism of the examiner. Underline that with a red marker. And when you're reading the examiner report, you will get some appreciation of the examiner, that this is what the student did good. Underline that with green. You will get so much red and green in the examiner report. You will get so many areas where the examiner criticizes the student. There are so many areas where the examiner appreciates the student. So if you can do the analysis in red and green, and you keep doing that over 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, and 2019, at the end of the day you will have a list of examiner criticism in the red, and you will have a list of examiner appreciation in the green. So I hope you will do this do's and don'ts analysis, and you will do these do's and don'ts analysis from the recent examiner report, because the recent examiner report will give you insights about what have been the weaknesses of the student and what have been the strengths of the student. And if you can highlight those strengths and weaknesses through a red pen and a green pen while you were reading the examiner reports, that can be so constructive for you. So I hope you find some benefit of this red and green analysis, because the red analysis will help you to find the danger, and the green will help you find, okay, this is something I can do. So if you do a proper red and green analysis of the examiner report, that can be so beneficial for you. So I hope all of you, after the end of the day one, you will be downloading the examiner reports, all the examiner reports which is coming in front of your screen. And when you practice these past papers, you will be reading the examiner report and you will be amazed to see how much you gain from an examiner report. You will be really amazed to see that. And if you do the red and green analysis, that will be so good for you in terms of becoming successful in the December 2019 exams. So that is my concern area, right? That how will we know what my examiner expects from me? If I'm not reading the examiner reports, I have no idea what my examiner expects from me. And I go to the exam hall. So I hope you will make this habit of meeting your examiner expectations, and you will be downloading these examiner reports after the day one ends today, and you will maintain a proper folder. You will take out a printout, maintain them, and you will read them. Okay, now from the recent past papers which have been encouraged that you will be doing, and from the recent examiner reports which have been encouraged that you will be reading. Finally, looking at the paper format, because there might be many students in this webinar who are giving the AAA for the very first time. We know that the AAA paper is divided into two sections, where section A consists of one 50 marks question, and that's basically the agenda of the day one today and the day two tomorrow. And then the section B consists of a question two and a question three, which is basically the agenda of the day three and day four. Now, I'll be exploring these three questions over the next 4 days. So you have an idea about what exactly the examiner is expecting from you within the first question, the second question, and the third question, and what sort of areas comes within the first, second, and third question. Uh, you should be knowing which areas falls under the question one, which areas falls under the question two, and which areas fall under the question three. These slides will be shared with you as a resource of this webinar, so you can explore the areas which comes under the question one, under the question two, and under the question three. But I will be making you realize the question one over the next 2 days, the question two on the day three, and the question three on the day four. So you will have a very better idea of what exactly the examiner expects from you within these three questions. But these are all compulsory questions, right? There is no choice. You have to do all three of them within the stipulated time in the exam paper. So rather than I spend time on the breakdown of the question one, two, three, because I'll be doing these breakdowns over the next days to come. So I hope it's better that you read the breakdown yourself, because these resources have been shared with you, and I'll be doing it practically over the next 4 days to give you a better understanding of the question one, of the question two, and of the question number three. So it's all compulsory paper, no choice. Three questions, 150 and 225 marks questions, which you need to attempt within the stipulated time in the exam hall. So with all that analysis, let's finally start now with the definite agenda of the day one. Let's see what is inside the day one and what will you be learning from the day one. On the day one and on the day two tomorrow, I will be focusing on the question number one of the AAA paper, which is a 50 marks question. And I'll be looking at the question one, untouched areas. Untouched areas, the areas I have not touched upon in my previous webinars. I'll not be touching upon the areas from the question one, which have already been done in my previous 7 webinars, and you have a library to explore, and I'll be encouraging and I'll be showing you the library in my live session, so you're encouraged to go and explore the library for all the areas I have already touched upon in my previous session. So I'll be exploring the untouched areas, which I've never touched upon in the previous webinars. And I'll be exploring so many question number one for the untouched area. So today on the very first day, I'll be exploring these question ones, 5 question ones today, December 15, June 17, June 15, June 16, and the latest one, June 19. And on the day two, tomorrow, I'll be exploring September 18, June 18, December 17, and December 18. So that means nine, in total, nine question number one, I'll be exploring over the next 6 hours, but only for the untouched area. That will give you so good idea of the question number one. And for the areas in the question number one which have already been done, you need to see the library of my previous webinars, which I will be encouraging over the next 3 hours. So that's how the agenda is for the first day and then for the day coming tomorrow. So let's unfold this agenda. Okay, the recommended articles which you will be reading for the question number one, and these articles have been shared with you as the resource for the day one. The articles recommended are Planning and Audit of Financial Statements, Acceptance Decision for Audit and Non-Audit Engagement, and then the exam technique articles, part 1, 2, 3, 4. This will be shared on the day 5 as a resource, but you can even download these articles, part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4 from the ACCA website. But these articles are recommended for the question number 1. You should have with you an article known as Planning and Audit of Financial Statement. You should have with you an article known as Acceptance Decision for Audit and Non-Audit Engagements. And you should have articles with you, part 1, 2, 3, 4. You can download them from the ACC website, and you have already been provided these articles as part of the resource for the day one. Only the 4 technique articles will be shared with you on the 5th and the final day. Right, so these are the recommended articles. Now, why are these recommended articles? You will realize that once I start with you the question number 1. Now, when we look at the question number 1, which is a 50 marks question in the AAA paper, what you should be knowing about the first question. And I try to do a very careful research from a student angle, that what a student should know about question number 1 approaching the December 2019 exams. And this is the result of my research. Number 1, you should know the time spent for question number 1. How much time you should be spending on the first question. Number 2, your position in the case study, who you are in the question number 1. So that's the second thing we need to explore today in terms of the question number 1. The third thing in the question number 1 is professional marks. Do we know what professional marks are? Do we know how we take professional marks in the question number 1? So that's another area which needs research and which needs to be explored on the very first day of this webinar. Stage of audit at which this question is set, because a lot of times students have no idea at which stage of audit the question number 1 is set. If you have no idea about the stage of audit at which the question number 1 is set, that means you're not prepared well to tackle the question number 1. And if you know the stage, then you know everything which happens at that stage, and everything which happens at that stage can be examined in the question number 1. And I'll make you realize shortly that at which stage of audit the question number 1 is set, and then you will realize that everything which happens at that particular stage will be examinable in the first question. The next, topics examined. What sort of topics are examined in the first question? That can only be known if you know the stage. So if you know the stage of audit, we can know the topics which are examined in the very first question. And then obviously when you practice the recent papers, the recent 6 papers, recent 7 papers, recent 8 papers, you will realize which topics are examined. And that's what I am doing over the next 2 days for the first question. So This is my research and which I need to now spend time on with. So question number one, how much time I should be spending on my first question? What is my position in the first question? What are professional marks? What is the stage of audit at which the question one is set? And what are topics which are examined in the question number one? Now, these answers will really help you refine how you look at the question number one. So let's have a holistic picture of the question number one. And I perhaps believe a lot of students will be realizing for the first time this importance of the first question. And you might not have done this much research on the first question, that how crucial the first question is. Time spent. How much time you should be spending on the question number one and on the rest of the paper. Let's do a time analysis for the entire paper. The total exam time is 3 hours and 15 minutes, right? So 3 hours and 15 minutes of the total exam time means that we have 195 minutes. Now, having 195 minutes, how would I be allocating the 195 minutes on my 100 marks paper? Let's do a careful analysis. I divided the 195 minutes with 100 marks, and I got an answer 1.95 minutes per mark. So 195 minutes, that's a simple calculation, divided by 100 marks. So I have 1.95 minutes per mark. This is the time I have to read, plan, and write. 1 mark. So for 1 mark, I have 1.95 minutes to read, to plan, to write. Now this is an equation which is to go over the 100 marks paper, that for every single mark I have 1 minute and 95 seconds in which I need to read, in which I need to plan, in which I need to write. Now you do that over the whole paper. 1/4 time should ideally be spent on reading and planning. This is recommended. Out of the total time you have is 195 minutes, right? Total time you have is 195 minutes. So out of the total 195 minutes, you should be spending 1/4 of your time on reading and planning. So 1/4 of 195 is 48 minutes. So that means in the whole paper, you have 48 minutes of reading and planning time. Have you ever realized that? Have you ever done that much reading and planning in your paper? I have no idea why students are in so rush in exam hall, why they're in so hurry in the exam hall. Why are they so panic? We all know as accountants that planning leads to good execution. But even knowing that, we don't apply that. That's the big dilemma. I hope you're realizing this model in front of your screen, that 1/4 of the time should be spent on reading and planning. So is everyone getting the answer 48 minutes? 1/4 of 195 minutes? So 1/4 time should ideally be spent on reading and planning. That's 48 minutes of your total time. Now, when you look at the question one, that means out of the 48 minutes, the question number one should have 24 minutes of reading and planning time. The question number two should have 12 minutes of reading and planning time. And the question number three should have 12 minutes of reading and planning time. So in how much time you should read and plan the question number one? 24 minutes. So in 24 minutes, you should read and plan the question number one. Is that clear with every one of you? If I can just get your quick answers. 24 minutes to read and plan the first question, right? And then 12 minutes each for the question two and for the question three. And has everyone understood 1/4 time should be spent on reading and planning? 1/4 time should be spent on reading and planning. That is 48 minutes of the total time you have in exam hall. So 195 minutes minus 48 minutes. 195 is the total time. I minus the 48 minutes, which is my reading and planning time. Now, how much time I am left with? I'm left with the 3/4 time, and the 3/4 time is 147 minutes. So I have another 147 minutes to write. Now that means if I divide 147 minutes with 100 marks, so to write, I only have 1.47 minutes to write 1 mark answer. I had 1.95 minutes, but that 1.95 minutes include the reading time, includes the planning time, includes the writing time. Now, 1/4 of that time has to be spent on reading and planning. So I'm left with 147 minutes, right? 147 minutes. And I divided the 147 minutes with 100. So how much time I have to write 1 mark? 1.47 minutes to write 1 mark. And see, I did the analysis below. So for the question number 1, I have 74 minutes to write. For the question number 2, I have 37 minutes to write. I'm rounding them off. And for the question 3, I have 37 minutes to write. Now see, in front of your screen, you have a whole equation. Now, no one can ask me, how much time should I give to question number 1? Can you all judge how much time you should be giving to question number 1? 24 minutes for reading and planning and 74 minutes for writing. How much time should you be giving to question 2 and 3? 12 minutes each to reading and planning and 37 minutes each to writing. Is this equation clear to everyone? If I can get your quick replies. And does this equation sounds soothing? Because that's the only way we can make equation. We have 195 minutes. We divided the 195 minutes with 100 marks. We got 1.95. Now out of 1.95, 1/4 is reading and planning time, and 3/4 is the writing time. So now can you do this allocation every time you do a question at home? You will simply multiply that with 1.95, and out of 1.95 you will take 1/4 time for reading and planning and 3/4 time for writing. So and if you follow this, you will be completing the paper in a very good manner, and you might be coming out of the exam hall more happy than a student who have not allocated 1/4 time to reading and planning. So please follow this formula, and I'll be sticking to this formula over the next 5 days so that you keep revising it. So we are starting the question 1 today, right? Where we have 24 minutes to read and plan and 74 minutes to write. So please assure this formula, and please assure that you got this formula very, very effectively. So that's the time spent, right? Your position, role in the case study, who you are in the case study. Have you ever imagined that? In the AAA paper, your position uh, or your role in the case study is audit manager. You are an audit manager. But have you ever wondered that when your examiner says you are an audit manager, what it means? Have you ever realized that? You are an audit manager. That carries with it some expectations. When you are an audit manager in the exam question, and when you are an audit manager in the question number 1, which we are focusing on today, with that role of a manager, there are some expectations. Have you ever realized those expectations? The examiner says you are a manager, but with that, there are expectations. Have you ever wondered about expectations? Have you ever realized these expectations which are coming with the position you have in the exam paper? So expectations, how will you portray those expectations? Is there a rule? Is there a way how you can do that? Because in the actual world, none of you is an audit manager. So when we are not practically the audit manager, is there a way out we can role play? We can role play in the exam hall that we are an audit manager. Is there a way of playing this role in 3 hours? Yes. Number one, prioritizations. In the case study, try to prioritize the more important things, because a manager only looks at important things. The manager don't look at minor things. So being a manager, if you are looking at the petty things in the case study, you're not portraying your role as being a manager. But if you're looking at the broad things in the first question, you're looking at the broad things within the case study, then you are a manager. A lot of time, students spend time on weak issues, minor issues, when there is so much important information given in the case study. And I'll make you realize that once I start the practice of the question number one shortly. Focus on important things first. Materiality. We know we calculate materiality in the AAA paper. Yes or no? We know how to calculate materiality, right, in the AAA paper. So will the manager be focusing on material things, something which is material to total assets, something which is material to profit, or something which is material to revenue? So will the manager be focusing on material things? And is the manager concerned about determining the materiality, calculating the materiality? So how many times the student ignore materiality or student ignore the material things within the case study and do not realize for a single minute that they're a manager? Flagged issues. When you're reading the case, there is so much flagged issues. Flagged issues means the issues which are specifically given in the case study. A lot of time, the student don't look at the issues which are flagged in the case study. You will see some paragraphs written by examiner in a case study where the examiner is trying to do a commentary, or the examiner is trying to tell you something in depth. Just an example. Company is listed. Look at this sentence. Company is listed. That is a sentence, right? Against that, there is something written in the case study that during the year, the company acquired a subsidiary, and because of the acquisition of the subsidiary, there was a goodwill recognized of a $15 million in and the calculation of the goodwill is shown as follow, and there is a detailed calculation of the goodwill shown. So if I need to choose between the 2 points, company is listed versus during the year there has been an acquisition of a subsidiary which resulted in a goodwill, and the calculation of the goodwill has been shown, and there are different components of the calculation given. As a manager, where I will be focusing on? Will I be focusing on a listed company, or will I be focusing on the acquisition during the year? Which is a more important point for a manager? Can I get the answers? Which is a more important point for the manager, the listed company or the acquisition? If you need to do the bifurcations between the 2 points, obviously the acquisition. Company is listed, yes, that's definitely company is listed. I do audit of listed companies. I don't do audits of the family businesses. I don't do audit of private companies. But there was an acquisition. The acquisition was a case specific information. The acquisition was given in the case study, and there was a detailed analysis of acquisition. The examiner give you the value of goodwill. The examiner even give you the breakdown of goodwill. So where are we focusing on? Take another example. The question says sales are made in 100 countries. This is one statement, right? Sales are made in 100 countries. Against this, there is something written in the exam paper which says um, during the year, the company has recognized an impairment against one of its brand, and the impairment loss of a $30 million has been recognized because there were some complaints against the brand, and the company has determined the recoverable amount of the brand, and so on and so forth. you will see that examiner tries to spend something on the impairment more than sales are made in 100 countries. That was just a sentence. But sales are made in 100 countries and the examiner is writing a commentary on the impairment. He's writing lines and lines and lines on impairment. And he's telling you that the brand was impaired and why it was impaired and what was the reason of impairment. So, which is better? Spending time on an area where the examiner has done a commentary, or spending time on a journal statement which says sales are made in 100 countries? I hope you're getting the sense of a flagged issue. A flagged issue is the one where the examiner do commentary, and student normally ignores the commentary areas where the examiner has spent time on, and they try to choose sentences from the case study. So, as being a manager, am I more concerned about impairment testing? Because impairment is an estimate. There are so much subjectivity in the impairment. Or am I looking at just, okay, the sales are made in 100 countries, and I start to pick up ICE 21 and I start to pick up the foreign exchange gains and losses? Or am I more concerned with whether the impairment loss has been determined rightly or wrongly? I'm just giving you examples, right? Just to make a thought process here among all of you who are attending this live session, that you must have seen case studies, right? Is that true? And you must have seen that within the case study there are some paragraphs where the examiner do a commentary and there are some sentences. Have you ever seen that? Something is just written in a sentence and sometimes the examiner writes a paragraph on something. So is a sentence more important or is a paragraph more important? Is everyone getting what I'm trying to say? Is everyone getting the sense of what is a flagged issue? So how many times the student overlook a paragraph and they just took a sentence? You're not a manager. If you're not focusing on the paragraphs, you're not focusing on something which has been specifically given, how are you portraying the role of a manager in an exam paper? Is everyone clear on that? So we should be focusing on the flagged areas, the areas which have been specifically given by the examiner in the case study, rather than just finding words and sentences and ruling on words and sentences. And again, that's something which I need to portray, right? Once I start my practice over the next 2 hours of this webinar. Okay, the next thing, avoid hypothetical assumptions. A lot of time the student ignore the issues given in the case study and they just try to rush to assumptions. Don't take assumptions a lot. If you are taking assumptions, you're spoiling your answer. Just try to focus on what the examiner is telling you, because the the bad thing with assumptions is that the assumption is taken by a student, and when the student is taking an assumption, most of the time that assumption is very hypothetical, or that assumption is very wild, or that assumption is very illogical. So try to focus on specific things given to you rather than focusing yourself on assumptions. I'll try to give you some examples of that over the next day and two, as I will be drilling onto the question number one. But have you realized that, have you ever played the right role of a manager in exam paper, particularly those who are repeating this paper? Have you ever realized that you've played this role rightly? If I can get your answers. Have you ever done justice with this role in exam paper? And the breakdown of being a manager on your screen, is that giving you some benefits here? Is this breakdown of audit manager on your screen, is that giving you some benefits? Will you be playing a better role of a manager this time in December 19? So please, for 3 hours and 15 minutes, for 195 minutes, become a manager. Think like a manager. I understand in practical life you're not an audit manager, but you need to portray that. You need to role play that. And when you are playing a role, you need to meet the expectation of that role. Unless and until you will not pass. So you need to understand your position right in the first question, who you are. Okay, professional marks. In the first question, you have professional marks. We have seen the time spent on the first question. We have seen the position you are in the first question, and now comes to a very crucial element that in the first question there are professional marks. Professional marks are not there in the question two, right? And in the question three, they're only in the question number one. And we know what those professional marks are in the very first question. Briefing note. You need to write the answer in a briefing note format. And that's the only format you have in the AAA paper. That is so good. Every time, in every single exam setting, whether you look at the recent papers or you look at the oldest paper like 2010, 2011, the examiner will ask you, prepare a briefing note, write a briefing note. And the briefing note carries with it the four professional marks. And are you capable of taking these four marks coming out of the briefing note? And I have demonstrated writing the briefing note in my September 19 webinar, in my June 19 webinar, in my March 19 webinar. I've been doing it consistently. I've even given guidance on the way you need to start the briefing note, the way you need to end the briefing note. You should know how to write a briefing note. You should be gaining these four marks as very important. So look at the September 19 examiner report, what your examiner tells you about scoring these four marks. Examiner is saying there are four professional marks available in the question number one. Yes. These are awarded as follow. Even the examiner is giving you the breakdown. If you have read the September 19 report, you've downloaded this report, examiner is giving you the breakdown of these four professional marks. See, that's where the examiner wants you to meet her expectation. If you're not meeting her expectation as being an examiner, the examining team will not pass you. 1 mark is for the suitable heading. 1 mark is for the introduction of the briefing note. 1 mark is for the structure of the answer. And 1 mark is for the clarity of your answer. 4 marks. 1 mark is for the heading. You cannot lose that. 1 mark is for an introduction. You cannot lose that. 1 mark is for the structure. The structure can be rote learn, that what comes first and what comes after, like a structure of a letter or a structure of a report. But 1 mark is for a clarity. Some of you will get it and some of you will not. Examiner says the student normally gets 3 out of 4. The first 3 marks is something you can take if you know the suitable heading, you know the introduction, you know the structure. And I've covered that in my previous webinar. Please go and see those previous webinars. The day one, on the day one of the previous webinars, I have consistently covered the briefing note. I've consistently covered the breakdown of the 4 marks. But the 4th mark is very subjective. So candidates should refer to the published answer of section A to understand how to present a suitable heading. So examiner is saying, go and see my answers and go and see how I put a suitable heading, how I put an introduction, how I put the structure, and how I put the clarity. So 4 marks, briefing notes, and that's in the question number one. And that's a very important thing in the first question, right? So that means there are 46 technical marks in the question number one, and there are 4 professional marks in the question number one. So 4 marks plus the 46 marks makes the question worth 50 marks. So please assure you know the briefing note. Please assure you have revised the format of the briefing note either through my previous webinars or from the examiner answers as the examiner is referring to in the examiner report. Okay, now coming to a very important thing, the stage of audit at which the question one is set. Because if you don't know the stage of audit at which the question number one is set, you're not preparing yourself effectively for the first question. Let's see the stage of audit at which the question number one is set. Pre-engagement and a planning stage. The question one is set either at a planning stage or at a pre-engagement stage. and its planning stage is must. The question number one is set at the planning stage is a must. But can the examiner include something out of the pre-engagement? And do you know what pre-engagement is? Have you ever gone through pre-engagement before the 4th of November into this webinar? I need to break that down for you. I need to give you an understanding that do you know what is the planning stage? Do you know what is the pre-engagement stage? Have you prepared yourself for both? Because the question number one is set at the planning stage, but the question number one can include the pre-engagement stage as well. Ideas of the type of activities which takes place at the pre-engagement acceptance stage. And that's where I have recommended you an article, Acceptance Decision for Audit and Non-Audit Engagement, because this article tells you the pre-engagement stage. If you read this article, you will have a 100% clear idea of what is a pre-engagement stage where the auditor accepts a new audit client. So you should be knowing the fundamentals of accepting a new audit client. You should be knowing how the audit firm accepts a new audit client and what sort of activities the auditor perform when the auditor is accepting a new engagement or when the auditor is accepting a new client. So you should know the pre-engagement activities. So pre-engagement activities, as simple as that, means accepting a new client. And what you do when you accept a new client? The answer is given in this article, acceptance decision for audit and non-audit engagement. So that's one area which can be in the first question, right? Second, ideas of the types of activities which takes place at the planning stage, because planning is must in the question number one, right? You cannot get a question one without planning. That's the must area. Now, you don't know what happens at the planning stage, and you have no idea of what happens at the planning stage unless and until you read this article, Planning and Audit of a Financial Statement. It gives you insights, it gives you deep insights about what happened at the planning stage. These are examiner articles. So examiner wants you to know what happens at the stage of pre-engagement, and the examiner wrote an article on that. Examiner wants you to know what happens at the planning stage, and the examiner has written an article on the planning stage. And you go to the exam hall without reading these articles, and the question comes on pre-engagement and you blank. The question comes at the planning stage and you blank. So are you realizing to read these two articles, acceptance decision? Are you realizing to read the article planning and audit of financial statement? Because this will give you an idea about the stage at which the question one is set in P7 or in the AAA paper. So will you be reading these articles? Will you read this article to realize the type of activities that take place at the question number one, in the question number one? So is everyone clear that the question number one is a planning question, but within the planning question, there can be pre-engagement. There can be a new client, and the examiner can ask you what sort of pre-engagement activities you do when you are accepting a new client. There might be a case that ABC is a new audit client of your firm. And being a new audit client, the examiner asks you what sort of pre-engagement activities you do prior to accepting a new audit client. And you blank because you've not read the article. So are you realizing to know the stage at which the question number one is set? Will that make you better in the question number one? If I can get your answers quickly with a spontaneous quick replies. So if you know the stage of audit at which the question number one is set, will that make a remarkable impact on the quality of your answer? So please read these articles, please annotate this article, please go through these articles to know the fundamental stages at which the question number one is set. So pre-engagement, I'll be exploring that today and tomorrow. Planning stage, I'll be exploring that today and tomorrow, looking at the untouched areas which I've not touched upon in my previous webinars. Now look at this big picture in front of you. When I look at the question number one, the question number one consists of so many things, from the pre-engagement to planning. and you look at this big flow chart in front of you. On the left hand side, you can see I've already written here, covered in my previous webinars. Risk assessment comes in question number 1. I've covered that 7 times in my previous webinars. This is my 8th webinar. Procedures I've covered 7 times in my previous webinars. This is my 8th webinar. Ethical and professional issues I've covered 7 times in my previous webinar. This is my 8th webinar. I cannot touch these areas again. These areas have become exhaustive. I've done it 7 times. That means at least if I've done 2 questions in each webinar, I've done like 14 questions with you. I cannot touch upon this area again. You need to go and explore the previous webinars, and I'll be guiding you which webinars you will be watching in the library. So the left-hand side of the screen, risk assessment, procedures, ethical and professional issues, you do get them in the first question, right? But if you want to prepare yourself for risk assessment, for procedures, for ethical professional issues, you need to see my previous webinars. Is that okay and clear with every one of you? Right, and I'll just be showing you the link of the previous webinars and make your life easier. So go down to that link and you will see the library maintained by ACCA Pakistan for these previous webinars, and at a single click you can start to watch and play the previous webinars. On the right hand side you see the December 19 webinar, which is the untouched areas from the question number 1. Now in the December 19 webinar, starting from today, I need to look at the planning matters. I have not explored planning matters in my previous 7 webinars. I need to give you a knowledge of that. I need to focus on practice management, accepting a client. What are parameters of accepting a client? Pre-engagement, and other areas. There are so many other areas which comes in question number 1, but what are those other areas? What comes in other areas? You will be amazed when we see 5 questions today and 4 questions tomorrow. That's a total of 9 questions. And you will be amazed to see what other things comes in the first question. But in the first question, finding a risk assessment is a must. In the first question, finding procedures is almost must. Ethical issues is almost must. But with that, can your examiner give you planning matters? Yes. Can your examiner give you something about accepting a new client? Yes. Can your examiner give you something else in the first question? Yes. So let's have a holistic view of the first question. Some from my previous webinars and some gaining knowledge from this December 2019 webinar. So I hope this bifurcation is clear to you. On the left hand side are the areas which I've covered previously, and on the right hand side are the areas which I will be exploring today and tomorrow. Now look at this analysis, and this analysis took a lot of research. That when I see the last 5 exam settings, when I saw the recent 5 exam settings, which is December 17, June 18, September 18, December 18, and June 19. When I saw these recent 5 examiner papers for AAA, this helped me make this graph, which is in front of your screen. And you can see risk. Risk has came all 5 times because that's must. Question number 1 has to include risk, whether it is a business risk, whether it is an audit risk, or whether it is a risk of material misstatement. So, and I've covered that consistently in my previous 7 webinars. So, can you get a question 1 without risk? Never. Question number 1 is a planning question, right? And at the planning stage, the most important activity the auditor do is risk assessment. And that's the core area which comes in the first question. Ethical and professional issues. In the last 5 exam settings, they've come twice, 2 out of 5. So that means it's quite a regular feature, but not a permanent feature. Procedures. Procedures have come thrice in the 5 exam settings. So that means it's again a regular feature, but not a permanent feature. But finding procedures in the first question is something very normal. Finding ethical and professional issues in the first question is very normal. And obviously risk is a must part And that's an area, again, which I've covered in my previous webinar. You look at the right-hand side of the screen, are the areas which I need to do today and tomorrow. Planning matters have come 4 out of 5 times in the last 5 sittings. Practice management has come once out of 5 exam sittings, recent 5. Others have come 3 out of 5 times in the previous sittings. So can we go unprepared with the right hand side in the exam hall? I need an answer for this. Can we go unprepared with the right hand side of the graph? Can you realize the importance of the right hand side of the graph? 4 out of 5 times the planning matters, 3 out of 5 times others, 1 out of 5 times practice management. So is it an important area which you will be going through over the day 1, the day 2 today and tomorrow? And the left hand side, you have the library of ACCA Pakistan. You can explore the library for the left hand side. So you have a month, you have a whole month. This webinar has started early, which is giving you an opportunity that you have a whole month to prepare. And will you be seeing my previous webinars for the left hand side of the graph? If I can get your quick answers. Will you be seeing my previous webinars for the left hand side of the graph? And I'll be telling you which of them, right? I'll be telling you which of them. And for the right hand side, the day 1 today and the day 2 tomorrow is utmost important. Utmost important. Okay, now where can you find my previous webinars? That's so easy. Let's show you the clue. You go to the Google, and on the Google, you write vimeo.com/ACCA Pakistan /collections. Let's copy this hyperlink for you and put this hyperlink here in big. Can all of you see this hyperlink? So easy. vimeo.com/ACCA Pakistan /collections. Such an easy hyperlink, right? And you click this hyperlink or you type this hyperlink in your web browser, right? You can just type this vimeo.com/ACCA Pakistan /collections on your web browser, and you reach here. You can see this page in front. It says ACCA Pakistan /collections, and the 4 previous webinars, the 4 recent one. You can see the very first one is September 19. Then the one next to it is June 19. The one downwards is March 19, and the one previous to that is December 18. So 4 previous webinars. This is the 5th one. So if you want to explore risk, if you want to explore ethics, if you want to explore procedures, start from the recent one, September 19. Do that first. If you gain confidence, that's good. If you think, no, I need to do another webinar apart from September 19, then do June 19. But I don't think so there is a need to do all 3, because one student can take one webinar like September 19 webinar and might be satisfied, okay, I know it. But one student might say, okay, I need to do another one. So from September 19, you can go to the June 19, right? So all are mine webinars, right? These all webinars have been conducted by me. I've been conducting webinars from March 18 for AAA consistently. So you will see the same tone and same way of lecturing. So these are all previous webinars belongs to me, right? Which you're looking at on the screen currently. So is that clear with everyone? Can all of you reach this page, find the previous collections, and the priority is September 19, then followed by June 19, and it's up to you how many webinars you want to listen, but the priority is September and June as a must to listen to gain understanding about the left-hand side of the graph, risk, ethics, and procedures. And the right is what I'm covering today. Okay, now risk assessment has gone in my previous webinars. That is just a summary to make you realize that you need to see the previous webinars. In my previous webinars, I have gone through risk assessment. I have recommended the exam technique article part 2 on risk in my previous webinars. When you see the recording, you will see that I have recommended this exam technique article part 2 in my previous webinars for you to read. I have even covered the do's and don'ts of examiner in my previous webinars for the area of risk. And I have covered the marking schemes. I have even covered the way of writing answers to risk. And I've covered both the risk of material misstatement plus the audit risk. And I've covered the business risk as well. So you will get all supports from my previous webinar. So that is just a summary to make you realize that this topic has gone off and I'll not be spending time into my 8th webinar on this area, rather spending time on something more valuable. These are links. You must have got this presentation. These are day-wise resources which ACCA Pakistan share with you as handouts, and you can see these hyperlinks in the handout, which tells you for risk of material misstatement which webinar you should be listening, for audit risk which webinar you should be listening, and business risk which webinar you should be listening. I've given the hyperlinks, right? And I've given which webinar covers business risk, which webinar covers audit risk, and which webinar covers the risk of material misstatement. So you can see these hyperlinks. You just need to copy them in your web browser and explore them. So that's how your life can become more easier. Procedures. Again, this is covered 7 times in my previous webinars. You can explore my previous 4 webinars to be good on procedure. I've covered the examiner article on procedure, which is part 4, sorry. This part 4 article on audit procedures have been covered in my recent webinars. I have even informed students of a mnemonic known as ASP. You will get to know that from my September webinar, that what ASP stands for. What is a good procedure? Let's keep the curiosity, right? Let's keep the surprise factor. So you go and watch to get the full form of ASP. If I tell you the full form of ASP, you will not go down and explore my previous September 19 webinar. Then I even came across another mnemonic in my previous webinar for writing a good procedure, which is TADMSR. So you need to explore my September 19 webinar for what is TADMSR and how can that help you, how that can help you in writing a good procedure. So I've covered the marking scheme of procedures, 1 mark per procedure. I have covered that procedures needs to be case specific. These are all the qualities of procedures, right, which I've covered and I have drilled in my each of the previous webinars. So you need to go and explore my previous webinars for what ASP stands for, what TAD MSR stands for, 1 mark, case specific, and some common issues and procedures which I've covered in my September 19 webinar. And you can explore that September 19 webinar for some common issues the student do when they're writing in the procedures. These are links of webinars. You can watch my December 18 webinar for procedures and you can watch September 19. These are 2 recommended webinars, right? So I'll prefer you watch September 19, the most recent one, and then you watch December 18 because these are 2 very good webinars when it comes to procedure. So I hope you can see these hyperlinks. You can copy paste these hyperlinks to your web browser and you will easily reach the destination. I hope that will not waste much of your time because time is very crucial. But the good thing is you still have a month and everything is possible within a month. The last thing, ethical and professional issues. I've covered that in each of my previous webinar. I've covered the examiner article on ethics, part 1 in my last webinar, September 19. I have given you the knowledge of the code of ethics in my previous webinars. I have even discussed the conflict of interest and safeguards with you in the previous webinar, confidentiality in my previous webinars, threats and safeguards, management threat. What is a management threat? What are safeguards to management threat? These are all issues which I have covered so consistently in my previous webinars. So I was a bit distracted that should I be covering this for the 8th time? And I said no, I should be covering something new with you and something more, something which is in the 100 marks paper, but which has not gone through in the previous webinars. Listed companies and non-listed companies, what is the significance of listed and non-listed companies when it comes to ethical and professional issues, and explaining why it is a threat. These are all bullets which makes you realize what have been done in the previous webinars. So if you want to be good on ethical and professional issues, and you want to go through these bullets, and you want to know that I know every of these bullets here, then you need to explore my previous webinars. Because it's a big topic, so I've recommended 3 webinars: September 19, June 19, and March 19. If you explore these three, you will be wonderfully prepared for identifying and explaining ethical and professional issues, right? So is everyone clear that ethical and professional issues, procedures, and risk is all what I've explored in the previous webinars? If I can get quick answers for that. These 3 topics, risk, procedures, ethical and professional issues, have been done in the previous webinars. Do you all know how to access the previous webinars? Have I shown you the link, right? And is the hyperlink even given on your resources, which you must have got today as your handouts? Okay, that's great. Now that's bringing us to the start of the untouched areas. And from now onwards till the end of the day one and the whole day tomorrow, we are looking at the untouched areas, which will make you realize that what else comes in question number one apart from risk, ethics, and procedures. Okay, now that's the start of the day one. The very first thing you should be knowing is the planning methods in the first question. And this is my first untouched area. What are planning matters? We need to see the recent papers for that. And I'll be exploring 9 papers with you over the next 4.5 hours, 1.5 hour remaining today and 3 hours tomorrow, which will make you realize what basically planning matters are and what examiner has tested in planning matters in the previous papers. What is the importance and benefits of audit planning? This is what you need to read through the article, right? If you want to be good on planning matters, if you want to be real good on writing the planning matters if asked for in the exam question, what you need to do for planning matters, that's so simple, and you should not be lazy for this. See, this is the website of ACCA, which have the technical articles, right? I hope you've seen this many times, and you should be, because that is such an important website. And you have all the articles here, and you go down the articles and articles and articles. You will find an article here which is on planning. Okay, yes, that article I think has been removed because there are so many new articles have come in the last 3 to 6 months that they have just filtered down the other articles. So, but I've shared this article with all of you, right? You have this as your resource, so you can explore your resource. Planning and audit of financial statement has been given you as a technical article for the first day. See, this is the article which has been shared with you, and you need to go through this right here, this one. Planning and audit of financial statements. Right, so you need to go through this article, Planning and Audit of Financial Statements, which has been shared with you. And this article will really benefit you in gaining knowledge and what knowledge your examiner expects from you in terms of planning and audit of financial statement. So this is a core article, right? And I'll be recommending you the certain sections to read over the course of the day today. So you should know the planning matters by looking at the recent papers. I'll be exploring that with you. You should be knowing the importance and benefits of audit planning. You should be knowing the importance of analytical procedures as part of risk assessment procedures. and I'll be doing the question 1 of the June 16 exams for this, right? I'll be doing the methods to be considered in developing an audit strategy for an initial audit engagement. This is just a breakdown of planning methods the examiner have covered in the previous papers and expects from you in the previous papers, right? So you should know that what planning methods have come in the recent paper, what is the importance and benefits of planning, and you should understand this article is very important. That's an area, that's the reason this is coming in the recent papers as well. Planning is not an obsolete syllabus area, right? Planning is an utmost important syllabus area and is a regular feature, right? The only thing is that there are so many articles which have come in the last 1 year that planning as an article has gone off from the ACC website, but obviously they need space for the other articles to be uploaded. But I have shared that article with you, right? Matters to be considered in developing an audit strategy for an initial audit engagement. June 15, question number 1A. When you are making an audit strategy for a new client, for a new audit client, what sort of matters you should be considering? And have you ever realized what is an audit strategy? Have you ever realized that you've gone through the audit strategy from the examiner article? And the examiner is saying you should be knowing the matters in it to be considered in developing the audit strategy for the initial audit engagement. I'll be doing the June 15 question number 1A. And then another very important planning matter is additional informations. So many times you've seen past papers where the examiner asks students to recommend additional informations. June 17 question number 1B as an example, and December 15 question number 1A as an example. So this is the breakdown of the planning matters. This is what uh, I have realized through the analysis of the past paper, that the examiner has a very strong focus on planning matters, and I'll be exploring them through the practice session right after we get off from the very first break. Right. So it's time for a break. Post break, I'll resume directly with practice, and I'll be exploring the past papers, and we'll be exploring planning matters today in terms of the past papers. The papers we will be looking forward today to explore the planning matters, to explore the practice management, and to explore the other areas. The papers to go today, just to recap, so when you come after the break, you know which papers we are going through in terms of the first question. We are going through we're going through these questions on the left hand side of your screen. We are going through 5 questions today, and we're looking at the untouched areas. That is the planning matters, that is the matters, that is the other areas which comes in the question number 1, and that is basically the practice management. So December 15, June 17, June 15, June 16, and June 19, right? So I'll see you back in 15 minutes. It's approximately 7:30 here, p.m. Pakistan Standard Time, and I'll be back live at 7:45 p.m. The Pakistan Standard Time. And in the last 75 minutes, we'll be exploring these questions. If anyone is left, will be carry forward to the day 2 tomorrow, because we have the question number 1 itself on the day 2 tomorrow. Right, so it's time for a break and refresh yourself and come back in 15 minutes into the live session, right? So it's a break time till 7:45 p.m. and we'll resume with practice of question number 1. Just before you go off break, if you can give me a quick feedback of the session so far. How has been the session so far? If you can just drop your quick feedbacks before you go to break and come back with the resumption of the practice of the first question. Okay, so I'll see you back at 7:45 p.m. With the brush over the question number one from the recent past papers to make you realize how important issues we leave unattended going to exam paper. Okay, off to the break, and I'll see you in 15 minutes. Welcome back after the break. We were focusing on the question number one, untouched areas. And on the very first day today, we need to drill down the questions on the left, which is December 15, June 17, June 15, June 16, and June 19, and to identify which areas have been untouched in the previous webinars to give you an idea beyond risk, procedures, and ethics. And if any of these questions are left unattended, we have a whole date coming tomorrow, which is again on the first question. So they will automatically be carried forward. So let's start building up our journey on the practice session now. Now, when we look at the question number one, minus risk, minus procedures, and minus the ethical and professional issues, and we explore the other areas which have been in the recent 9 exam settings, just to identify, are we prepared for taking on those areas effectively, right? So let's go down, looking at the recent papers starting from December 15, looking at what your examiner asked you about plannings and other areas. So let's explore the journey now. Now, one of an important area to start on with from December 15, which is the first question. And there's a combination of recent to old questions. We're taking the recent 9, right? So from December 15, we're going up to the June 19 exams. Now, when you look at this situation, if this is the December 15 question number 1, and you go down and you look at the requirements of the first question, and you will see that within, because this is the old format, when the question number 1 used to be of 35 marks. Now the question number 1 is of 50 marks. But you can see that within the first question, you do find the fundamental areas. Audit risk, which is for 18 marks. I've covered that many times in my previous webinars. Then there is audit procedures worth 8 marks. So out of the total 35 marks, where 4 marks is for the briefing note. So that's the technical marks is 31. In the 31 technical marks, 18 marks have been given to risk, 10 marks have been 8 marks have been given to procedures. So that's 26 marks given to the core areas. And the 5 marks is being given on an area where the students normally underperform and they are a bit weak in this area, something which is a regular feature of the first question. And I've even touched upon that in my previous webinars, but I'll still do it for the sake of betterment. Additional informations. Recommend the additional information which should be relevant in the evaluation of audit risk. Now, in the first question, which is set at the planning stage, and you can see over here, it says, I need you to start planning of the audit of DALI companies. The question is set at the planning stage, right? No doubt about that. And at the planning stage, you need to assess the risk. At the planning stage, you need to explain the audit procedures, and at the planning stage, you need to recommend the additional information. So let's go down. I'll be using this Word file, and I'll be sharing this Word file consistently with you over my WhatsApp group. So I hope all of you have joined the WhatsApp group, be it the group 1, group 2, group 3, or group 4, because I think the previous 3 groups have been filled up. The 4th is been going on. I'll be sharing these files over all the groups. Okay, so December 15, the first one, and we're looking at the question number 1 of the December 15 exams, and we're looking into the part of this question, which is the part A2 for 5 marks. Part A2, which is for 5 marks, and this part focuses on uh, additional information. Now, firstly, and once forever, whichever exam paper we are doing over the day today and tomorrow, understand this as something final, what additional information is. I've covered this even previously, but there might be many new students joining in and might be needing a help on this area. In a planning question, when the examiner asks you to write additional information, the very first thing you should know that the additional information is the information the auditor should request. The auditor should request from the management at the planning stage, which will help auditor later in the audit, when which will help auditor later in the audit when performing the field work. So you are requesting the information from the management at the planning stage. It can also help you with the efficiency in the audit because you've requested management that when I come for my field work, I will be needing all this information. So the management will keep this information ready for you. So is the information the auditor should request from the management. And when are you requesting this information from the management? You're requesting this information from the management at the planning stage. And this will eventually help you later when you come for the audit of the Dali company, because you're currently planning the audit of Dali company in December 15. So you will be asking the Dali management that I will be needing this information, this information, this information, this information, this information, and this will eventually be helping me when I come for my audit later. Now, information means something which is a document. The information, right? We are focusing on a word which is known as information, and information means something which is tangible or something which is a document. So what are we requesting from the management? We are technically requesting from a management a document which you will be needing for your audit, which will be later helping you in the audit when you're performing a field work. So information is a document, because I hope you can feel the word information. Information means that it is like something of a piece of paper you're asking from the management that when I come to the audit, I'll need your cash book, for example. I need your bank statement. I need your fixed asset register, or I need a lease agreement, or I need the loan agreement. I need the board minutes. See, these are all documents, right? So information is something you're asking from the management. Now, these documents, what documents will you be asking from the management? Which documents will you be asking from the management? The documents needs to be linked to case study. You cannot write a journal list of documents. You cannot just go in the exam hall with a rote learning list, okay, board minutes, cash book, bank statement, lease agreement, loan agreements. There will be something in the case study, right, which will be helping you identify the document which you will be needing. So the documents you need from the management should be linked to the case study, because you need to be adaptive. You cannot just have a rote learn list of documents and you go to the exam hall. You need to be adaptive. And every document you request from management with a reason why you need the document, with a reason why, is equal to 1 mark. So you have 5 marks. So 5 marks means we need to write in 5 documents for the December 15 question number 1A2, and December 15 question number A2, we need to write 5 documents, and we need to write a reason after why we need this document. But can we write a journal list of documents here? If you can respond to my questions, can we write a journal list of documents here, or should we be looking at the case study of Dali to identify the specific documents? Right, we should be looking at the case study, right? We should be writing specific documents in terms of the case study, and be writing the reason of that. And 1 mark, right? Okay, let's explore the case study, right? And let's write in the answer. If I look at the case study, This is the way you need to answer it, right? You will say A2, and in the A2, you will write your answer this way. The auditor should request the following additional information from the DALI company management. Make it specific, right? The auditor should request the following additional information from the DALI company management at the planning stage, colon, and you start writing the information. So the auditor should request the following additional information from the management at the planning stage. Now, how many you need to write? 5. And they need to come from a case study. And with every information, you need to write the reason. I'll be sharing this Word file on a daily basis on the WhatsApp group. So you should not be worried about it. Okay, let's read the case. I'll be reading the selective case, right, in the constraint of the time. Now, when you look at the case, there are so many things within DALI where you need to have the documents. Some important things, right? See here. In March 2015, a cash-settled share-based payment plan was introduced for senior executives. Now, I should have an information about this cash-settled share-based payment plan was introduced. So there must have been a board approval for this plan. And that board approval will be very important for me because this will tell me the number of executives who will be getting this plan, and what are the conditions associated with the plan. What is the vesting period? Where do they have a 3-year vesting period or a 5-year vesting period? So the company has introduced a share-based payment plan, a cash settled share-based payment plan for the senior executives. And when I come to the audit, I need to verify the plan. I need to verify that the company has recognized the expense and the liability rightly. And for that reason, I should have details about the plan with me. So the very first thing I should be having from this area is uh, the board minutes. For the board minutes to confirm the approval and the conditions associated with the share-based payment plan introduced by DALI company. So I'll need the board minutes, but very specifically to the approval and the conditions associated to confirm the approval. See the reason to confirm the approval and the conditions associated. So am I just taking the board minutes for nothing? Am I taking board minutes just for nothing? No, I'm taking board minutes for something very specific to confirm the approval and the conditions associated. So the management knows why am I taking the board minutes. So I should have a logical reason, right? Otherwise, I'm not getting the full 1 mark in exam paper. So I got this information from the case, right? 2. See, I just have an extract of the December 15, right? So this is a long question, December 15. You can read that back at home and find more information, but I just only have 1 page of this December 15 in front of me. So I just need to find as much information as possible from this uh, to write. Look at this paragraph above. It says, the company's corporate governance was reviewed as part of the flotation process, resulting in the recruitment of the 3 new non-executive director and a new finance director. So the company has reviewed the corporate governance, right? And this has resulted in a recruitment of 3 new non-executive directors and a new finance director. So when a new non-executive director comes to the company or a new finance director comes to a company, will I be interested to know their qualifications as an auditor? Or will I be interested in knowing their experience, how capable, how competent these directors are? Is that of interest to the auditor? If I can get your answers. So will the auditor be interested in knowing the competence and the background and the experience of the NEDs and the finance director? Because the finance director is utmost important, right? Because the finance director is the custodian of the financial statement. If the finance director is not very competent, then there might be mistakes in the financial statements. There might be issues in the financial statements. So will the auditor be interested in gathering some information about the new non-executive directors and a new finance director? Definitely yes. Which information? Probably looking at their personal files to confirm the qualifications, experience, to confirm the qualification, experience, or competence of the newly inducted NEDs and the finance directors. So as an auditor, I will be looking for their personal files because I need eventually the human resource is an important area, and the auditor do spend a lot of time on the payroll when the auditor goes for the audit. Even the auditor is very much interested in the payroll systems and the expense which is recognized in the financial statement. So see, we wrote the reason, personal files. So am I just taking the personal files for no reason? Yes, the appointment letter sounds better. We can also take the appointment letter as a document, right? But are you picking the point which I'm trying to say here, that whichever document you request from the management, firstly needs to be from the case study, right? Number one. And whichever document you take from the management should have a very specific reason. Is everyone getting that point for scoring the 1 mark? So a document connected to a case, a document connected to a case with a definite reason, right? With a definite reason. So you should connect a document. You should connect a document, and with the document, you write the reason, right? But see, am I starting writing the additional information with a document here? Can you see the start? But I cannot write a action before a document. I cannot say review the board minutes. I cannot say review the personal file because I'll make them look like a procedure. So did I wrote an action before a board minute? Did I wrote an action before a personal file? Because if I write an action before a board minute, like review the board minutes, or I write an action before a personal file, like review the personal file, so what will I do? I will make it look like a procedure. Is everyone clear on that? So am I writing a procedure in the exam paper, or am I writing an information which I'm taking from the management? So this is exactly the way you need to write. Don't take hypothetical assumptions, right? I've given you a very clear rule of writing an information. Start with an information which is highlighted in yellow, followed by a reason, followed by a reason. So is everyone sound on the additional information? Let's take one final example and exit from this question because I need to do another question. Okay, uh, if I take you to a paragraph above here, it says, the customer is required to pay 30% payment in advance, and the remaining 70% is paid on the delivery of the machine to the customer. So the company makes machines for customer, right? So, but the customer pays 30% payment in advance and 70% is paid on the delivery of the machine. Can I confirm this from the contract with the customer, that what are the contractual terms, that they pay 30% in advance and 70% later? Can this be confirmed from a contract of a customer? Yes. And can I also have a review of, can I also have a copy of the accounting policy or the accounting policy itself, just to confirm how the company recognized the revenue? Because you cannot recognize 30% payment in advance as a revenue, right? because 30% payment in advance is your unearned revenue, is your deferred income. So will I be interested in the accounting policy for how the company deals with the 30% advance and 70% coming on the delivery? And will I be interested in knowing the contract with the customer to confirm the 30% and 70% as a terms of trade? So let's finalize the answer. Number three, I can have an accounting policy from the company, directly starting with accounting policy, not writing the word review, not writing the word copy. Accounting policy relating to revenue recognition. Do I need any accounting policy? No. I need the accounting policy with reference to the revenue recognition to confirm that revenue is recognized correctly. Revenue is recognized correctly. That is, the 30% payment in advance is treated as unearned revenue. So that's a big risk, right? Auditor will be interested to mitigate the risk. Auditor will be interested at how the company applies the accounting policy for the 30% payment in advance. And if it is written in the accounting policy that the 30% is treated as the unearned income till the time the machine is delivered, then that's the perfect accounting policy. But if it is written in the accounting policy that the 30% in advance is recognized as income, then that's the wrong accounting policy. So see, I started again with a document in yellow, and then I wrote the reason after to confirm. I wrote the reason. So is everyone getting the rules? So from a case study, try to find the information which is specific to the case, not outside the case, and try to find a reason of that information very specifically as to what the auditor will be looking for in terms of that information, right? And in this case study, Dali company, the share-based payment was a risk. The competence of a director was a risk because the director was taking some very wrong decisions, the finance director. And because the director was taking a very wrong decisions, I was very much concerned about his qualification and experience. So I need to check his personal file as to what is the qualification of a director when he's taking so wrong decisions later. And the revenue recognition is also a risk. So I purposely wrote informations which were addressing the risk given in the exam paper. Right, so the question was asking us, let's see the final part of this question again. The question here was asking you recommend the additional information which would be relevant in the evaluation of risk. So I purposely wrote those informations which will be helping me with the evaluation of risk, because in the first part, I must have done the audit risk question. So I exactly know when I come to the A2, what are risk. So after doing the part A, I know the risk. Then I know which information I will be needing from the case study, which will help me with evaluation of risk. Right. So I hope that sounds clear to all of you. I'm moving towards the next question. This is December 15, where the focus point was on the additional information. Okay, let's take on the next question. See what is the examiner asking us in the next question number 1. Okay, from the December 15, we have the next question, which is June 17. Let's see in June 17, question number 1, what is the untouched areas? You browse down and you look at the requirements. In this question, 16 marks are again allocated to risk of material misstatements. So that's the focused areas already covered in my previous webinar. Then there is procedures, and procedures again worth 10 marks out of the total 35 marks. So 10 marks going on procedures. and 16 marks going on risk. So that's 26 marks which are going on the fundamental areas out of the total 35 marks. And the 5 marks is coming yet again on additional information. Recommend the additional information which should be requested from the group, which would allow a more detailed preliminary analytical review to be performed. Now, see, the question is very different here. It is not asking you the additional information like the previous question, because in the previous question, we were looking at the additional information which will help us in evaluation of risk. So we were very specific writing additional information for share-based payment, very specific writing additional information for the accounting treatments or about the directors and their qualification. But over here, we are asked to write additional information, no doubt about that, but the additional information which would be relevant for a detailed preliminary analytical review to be performed, 5 marks. Now we need not to see the case, because as a student we should know that to perform a preliminary analytical review, what sort of information the auditor needs. That's a more natural question. June 17, question number 1, part B, and it says we need to recommend the additional information relevant for performing a detailed preliminary analytical review. And we know analytical reviews are performed at the planning stage, right? And that's a very important procedure the auditor adopt at the planning stage. And if you don't know what the auditor do in an analytical review, you cannot write the 5 additional information for 5 marks. So uh, if you need to find the additional information which is relevant to performing a detailed analytical review, and you have no idea what an analytical review is, how will you write the 5 additional informations? The December 15 question was case specific. Over here, if anyone does not know what a preliminary analytical review is, you will not be writing additional information for 5 marks. The rule remains the same. We need to write a document, right? And document within it with a reason. But do you ever know what is a preliminary analytical review? Have you ever wondered about that? Let's do a quick knowledge. In a preliminary analytical review, what's the scope of the preliminary analytical review? The auditor performs what? Number one, the auditor performs ratio analysis as part of analytical review. The auditor do the comparison of the current year, auditor do the comparison of the current year with last year, auditor do the comparison of the budget with actual. This is all analytical procedures, right? Auditor do the comparison of the results with industry. You compare the result of the company with industry. And then the auditor do the trend analysis. The trend analysis over last 3 to 4 years, for example. So you do the comparison of the current and the last year. You do even the trend analysis of like 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. This is the scope of analytical review. Now, if you know the scope of analytical review, you can think about what information you need to do this. Can we do this information? Can we do all this without information? So now can you realize the answer for this question? The auditor should request the following additional information from the management to perform an analytical review. So to perform an analytical review, what sort of information you need? For example, you need the budgets of the company to to compare the actual results with the budgets and to identify any unusual variances and to identify any unusual variances. Trend analysis. I might be needing the prior year financial statements, of last 3 to 4 years to confirm the trend analysis in sales, expenses, profit, etc. Just to confirm what has been the trend in sales, expense, profits, I might be needing the prior year financial statements. Without this, I cannot do this. So, do you believe to perform an analytical review, there is a need of an information? What about the breakups? The breakups of sales on a month-wise basis. I will be needing from a company the breakup of sales on a month-wise basis because that will help me to analyze uh, that on a month-on-month basis how much sales increases, because there might be a company which is a seasonal company. So in a certain month of the years the sale will be rising a lot, and in a certain month of the years the sale will not be rising a lot. So the month on month analysis can really help the auditor to investigate the fluctuations, uh, like a seasonal fluctuations. And we also know there is a risk of fraud in the last few months of the company. Normally, the company starts to inflate the sales in the last few months to achieve the targets. So even if I have a breakup of sales on a month-wise basis, I can also investigate, is it so that the sales are increasing in the last few months? So I need the breakup of sales on a month-wise basis to confirm fluctuations, to confirm any unusual fluctuations, to confirm any unusual fluctuations within month on month basis. Right, I can also take the breakup of the breakup of operating expenses to confirm unusual fluctuations, to confirm any unusual fluctuations within expenses. So if I want to know which expense has increased a lot or which expense has decreased a lot, I will be needing the breakups of the operating expenses to confirm any unusual fluctuations within operating expenses. Which operating expense has increased more or less from the last year? You need to understand one thing very important, that whenever the auditor is doing the analytical procedure on the balance sheet and on the income statement, the numbers given are aggregate numbers, and aggregate numbers normally don't help the auditor in performing an analytical review. The auditor needs to have a breakdown of numbers. For example, sales. I might be needing the breakdown of sales, that how much sales are local and how much sales is international, how much sales are made within the country and how much sales are made outside the country. Or I might be needing a breakup of the sales, that how much sales are made on cash and how much sales are made on credit, how much sales are made through the retail outlets and how much sales are made through the website. So do you think as a student that such breakups are important for the auditor to investigate the fluctuations more carefully, like the breakup of sales between cash and credit, the breakup of sales between retail and the website, the breakup of sales between local and international? Will that really help auditor to investigate the fluctuations more carefully? Is that clear with everyone? right? So the more disintegrated the data is, the more easier that is for the auditor. So if the auditor disintegrates the data, breaks the data, it becomes more easier for the auditor to investigate the fluctuations. But if you don't know the scope of analytical procedures, you don't know what is done in an analytical procedure, and you will be blank in the exam paper about writing additional informations. So for analytical procedures, I need budgets. For analytical procedures, I need the prior year financial statements. For analytical procedures, I need breakup of sales, for example. I need breakup of operating expenses, for example. So I need the disintegrated data, right, to perform things in a better manner. So I might be needing the disintegrated final point. I would be needing the disintegrated data. I need the disintegrated data of the accumulated numbers in the financial statements to perform more reasoned analysis of the fluctuations. So I'll be needing the more disintegrated data so that I can perform a more reasoned analysis of the fluctuations. Yes, I might be needing the disintegrated data of the cost of goods sold. That's wonderful. I need the breakup of the COGS. I need to know how much was the opening inventories or how much was the closing inventory. What was the fluctuation in the closing inventory? So I need breakups of the intangible assets. I need the breakup of the current assets. I need the breakup of the fixed assets just to see where has been the fluctuation, what has fluctuated from the last year to this year. So I hope you're getting my point here, that when the examiner is asking you that you need to write the additional information, which is for a detailed preliminary analytical review. So is everyone clear on the scope of the detailed preliminary analytical review? What can be done in a detailed preliminary analytical review? And will that be helping us in writing an answer for this requirement? Yes, breakup means breakdown, right? You write breakdown, you write breakups. That's one of the same thing. So is everyone clear on this requirement? June 17, question number 1, part B. So try to focus on what the examiner is asking. Is it the additional information like a December 15 question? Or is it an additional information like a June 17 question where the examiner was focusing on the information relevant for performing a detailed analytical review, right? So you can have your own list, right? I've just given you some examples of what the auditor can do when he's performing the analytical review as part of the uh, answer. And you can think about some more examples, right, which can be helpful to the auditor. Okay, the next question. From December 15, we've gone to June 17. Now from the June 17, we're moving ahead now. And this time we're jumping into June 15. There is a very important question in the June 15 exams, question number 1, and I'm touching this for the very first time throughout my previous webinars. June 15, question number 1, and you go down and scroll. The audit risk for 17 marks, procedures for 8 marks. But see, there is a requirement for 6 marks which have never been touched upon, and that is a requirement where students normally go unprepared in exam hall. They are prepared on audit risk, they're prepared on procedures, they do that. But when these requirements like 5 marks in June 17, 5 marks in December 15, 6 marks in June 15, and if you're not scoring any of these 6 marks, you're not passing the AAA paper. If you're not scoring those 5 marks in June 17 and in December 15, you're not passing the paper. Now see what is the examiner asking in the 6 marks. Examiner is saying, uh, see this requirement for the 6 marks, which I have already highlighted in yellow. Discuss the matters specific to the planning of the initial audit engagement which should be considered in developing the audit strategy. Discuss the matters specific to the planning of the initial audit engagement which should be considered in developing the audit strategy. 6 marks. June 15. Question number 1. Discuss the matters specific to the planning of an initial audit engagement. Question mark, 6 marks. Now try to understand this topic very carefully. The question says you need to discuss. Number 1, what you need to discuss? You need to discuss the matters. Which matters? Specific to the planning of an initial audit engagement. Now, that means we need to plan our answer. Let's plan our answer first, then write the answer. Now, when you plan the answer, the very first thing which should come to your mind in the exam hall is that I want to discuss the matters specific to planning. Matters is equal to specific to planning. Then the more important thing, specific to the planning in journal? No. Specific to the planning of the initial audit engagement. Initial audit engagement means, can you give me quick answers? Initial audit engagement means what? The first year audit. That's wonderful. Initial audit engagement, first year audit. So am I writing any planning matters? No. I need to write the matters specific to planning of the initial audit engagement, and the initial audit engagement means the first year audit, or the initial audit engagement means the new audit client. So what should we know to write an answer? Number 1, first of all, we should know the planning matters, right? We should know the planning matters. If a student have no idea what planning matters are, how will you connect the planning matters with the first year audit? So what you should know? Should you be having the knowledge as a student of what are planning matters? Have you ever wondered about them? If you don't know what are planning matters, the second question becomes more difficult. Knowledge of what are planning matters and knowledge of how planning how planning matters impact the initial audit engagement. So can you see these two questions which I've wrote for you? This is planning. We have not yet started to write an answer. Try to understand the requirement in the exam hall first. 1/4 of your time should be spent on reading and planning. So it's a 6 marks question. 6 marks question means, and you are taking a 6 marks question in exam paper, multiply by 1.95. And you multiply the 6 by 1.95. What is the answer you're getting here? 9. 6 multiplied by 1.95 is 11.7. Okay, we have 11.7 minutes. And out of the 11.7 minutes, 1/4 of this time should be spent on planning. So what's the 1/4 time of 11.7? 2.9. So we have 2.9 minutes to plan the answer. So see, we have just planned it. We need to write the matters regarding planning, but specific to the first year audit. And then we have the time to write the answer. So I hope you're getting the importance of planning and writing the answer right. Okay, now let's do a recap. You go down the examiner article, which I have shared with you for day 1, and you can see that on your screen in front. Right? This examiner article, planning an audit of financial statement. See, examiner is covering so basic things in the article, but the examiner even test you for these things in exam paper. When does planning take place? The next thing, what are preliminary activities which takes place at the stage of planning? What the auditor do at the stage of planning? Then at the stage of planning, you need to make your audit strategy and an audit plan. Then the examiner is telling us what is an audit strategy. What is an audit strategy? Then the examiner is telling us that this is the breakdown of audit strategy, right? It's all the audit strategy. Then the examiner is telling us what is an audit plan. Then the examiner comes down with changes to audit strategy and audit plan. Can there be some changes to audit strategy and audit plan? Suppose there comes a question in December 19 exam paper that discuss the possibilities of changes to audit strategy and audit plan, and you blank. Have you ever realized reading articles with headings, because these headings can become exam questions? Whatever question comes in December 19 exam paper which asks you discuss the reasons why there can be changes to audit strategy and audit plan. Are you getting the importance of what I'm trying to say? So do you realize how you should be reading every heading of the examiner article? Because every heading can then be converted to an exam question for 5 marks and 6 marks. So examiner is also telling how changes can come to your audit strategy and audit plan. You need to read this article, right? Then there is a documentation, how you document the planning, direction, supervision, and review. How planning enables a proper direction of the audit, how planning enables a proper supervision of the audit, how planning enables a proper review of the audit. I hope a lot of you must be looking at this article for the first time, and a lot of you must be looking at these headings in this article for the first time, that there is so much breakdown in the planning article, so rich article, right? And you miss all this and you go to the exam hall, and the examiner asks you how planning helps in direction supervision of the audit. There's a whole section on direction and supervision which comes connected with planning. Now see comes the question we are focusing on. See this heading here, additional consideration in initial audit engagement. If I am doing planning, what additional I have to do when I am doing initial audit engagement? Now, I hope you can understand this word here, additional consideration. Additional means apart from the others, apart from the other planning matters, there are some additional planning matters which I need to do in the first year audit. So am I getting the answer for June 15 question, that what additional consideration should I be giving in the initial audit engagement? And am I getting the answer for the June 15 question from here? So you cannot say the examiner sets a question out of the box. The examiner is not setting questions out of the box. He's setting the questions from within the articles the examiner has set already. How many of you have ever read this paragraph, audit considerations in the initial audit, additional considerations in the initial audit engagement? How many of you are reading it for the first time? And this session is making you realize that you have to read it for the first time. How many of you are reading it for the first time? And how many of you are amazed looking at such a question exists in the past paper asking you additional considerations in initial audit engagements? So are you getting the benefit of getting to know the importance of reading such articles and going to exam halls, because anything is examinable? So let's see what is the examiner telling us in this paragraph and connect this with June 15 paper. The final section, I'm reading this paragraph in front of your screen, which is telling us what additional considerations we should be giving to the initial audit engagement planning. The final section of ISA 300 relates to initial audit engagements. and requires the auditor to perform client and engagement acceptance procedures. So when we are doing the initial audit engagement, we need to perform the client acceptance procedures. We need to perform procedures like client integrity procedures, because if you are doing planning of an initial audit engagement, that means you have taken on a new client. And if you have taken on a new client, you must not have taken a new client without a client screening procedures or engagement acceptance procedures, and also communicate with the previous auditor. So these are fundamentals, right, of the initial audit engagement, that you do the client screening and you communicate with the previous auditor where there has been a change of auditor in compliance with the relevant ethical requirements. The ISA recognized that for an initial audit engagement, the auditor may need to expand the planning activities because the auditor does not ordinarily have the previous experience with the entity that is concerned when planning the recurring engagement. When you're doing the recurring planning, you have knowledge of business. When you are doing the first year planning, you don't have knowledge of business. Is that true? The examiner is saying you need to spend more time in planning the first year audit. Is that true? Yes, because we have less knowledge of business in the first year audit. So is the examiner giving us some clues to write an answer? Let's go back drafting in the answer. So the examiner article, right, is giving us the clue for answer, and has a paragraph for the same thing. Now, how many marks? Whenever you get some knowledge requirements in the first question, apart from additional information, right? Whenever you get a knowledge requirement in Q1, except for additional information, that is worth 2 marks per valid point explained. So see, examiner is so generous here. Examiner is saying, whenever I give you something of a knowledge like this, you write one valid point and I'll give you 2 marks. So not a lengthy answer. 6 marks divided by 2, we're writing 3 logical points, right? So we have 6 marks, divide that by 2 per point is equal to writing 3 valid points. That is the specific matters in planning the initial audit engagement. So what's the first matter in planning the initial audit engagement? Answer. Let's write a proper answer, because I didn't share the answers. I was of a view that I will be writing answers this time so that you can focus on the way I write the answers. The audit firm should look into the following specific matters when planning the audit, when planning the first year audit of TED company. And you can make a heading here, right? In the heading, you can write specific matters for planning. That becomes your heading. And then you say, the audit firm should look into the following specific matters when planning the first year audit of the TED company, which is a company in the June 15 paper, right? First year, when planning the first year audit of TED company. Okay, and you start to write the matters in a paragraph form. Every para will give you 2 marks. You can make headings of paragraph if you want to. The first matter, you should look into the specific matters in planning the first year audit of TED company. Results of the client screening procedures. Results of the client screening procedures. You must have done the client screening before planning, right? But from a client screening, you must have gained some insights. From a client screening, you must have identified some risky areas. From the client screening, you must have gained some understanding of the business. Is that true? Do client screening help us identify some risky areas before we accept the audit? Yes or no? Do client screening help us understand the risky areas? Do client screening help us realize some important issues within the company? Because client screening is done before, right? And client screening followed by planning if we accept the client. So we are not writing the client integrity because that's a pre-engagement activity, but see how I'm writing the answer. At the planning stage, I want to see the results of the client screening procedures and how can that help me in planning. So the results of the client screening procedure, will that be helping me in planning? Definitely yes. See how you write the answer. The results of the client screening procedure needs to be carefully evaluated, as this can help the audit firm in gaining insights of the new audit client and will help in planning will help in planning the audit in a more productive manner by the identifying the risky areas through the screening results. So you must be having the screening results, right? But you just need to use those results at the planning stage so that you can identify the risky areas, which will be really beneficial for you when you're doing the first year audit. So see how I wrote the heading results of the client screening procedures and how they helped us in the planning as a specific meta. Number two specific meta, more knowledge of business. Because I'm doing planning for the first year, more knowledge of business. And I have less knowledge of trade company. So I need to gain more knowledge for doing a very proper planning. And we know knowledge of business is a very specific matter when you are planning. And with more knowledge, we can have a better planning. So the audit firm should gain more knowledge, should gain more knowledge of trade company at the planning stage by having discussions with those charged with governance. You can go and meet the management, right? The audit firm should gain more knowledge of the debt company at the planning stage by having discussions with those charged with governance. The previous auditor, you can correspond with the previous auditor, and you must have corresponded already, and you can gain more knowledge from the previous auditor. The audit firm should gain more knowledge of debt company at the planning stage by having discussions with those charged with governance, the previous auditor, because the additional knowledge will help the audit firm in devising a suitable audit strategy for the first year audit. So do you believe if you have more knowledge about your first year audited company, it will really help you to devise a good audit strategy? So should you gain more knowledge as a very specific matter when you're planning the audit of debt company for the first year? And will that more knowledge really help you getting a good audit strategy for your first year audit? Right, so we are discussing the planning matters, right? So planning matters is about knowledge, planning matters is about screening. The last matter, making my 6 marks answer. When I am doing the first year audit, I need to be very focused, as my very specific planning matters is the opening balances. We know that when you do the first year audits, the opening balances becomes real important planning matters, and I need to plan for my opening balances. I need to plan for risk inside the opening balances. Is that true? Do the auditor really go down into opening balances in the first year audit? Do the auditor really drills the opening balances in the first year audit? Because you have not done the last year audit. So do you think opening balances is a very specific matter when you're doing the first year planning, first year audit of a company? It will not be an important matter, right, when you're doing a recurring audit. So opening balances is not a matter of concern for a recurring audit, right? It is a very specific matter for a first year audit. So opening balances, the audit firm should carefully plan work on the opening balances, should carefully plan work on opening balances for dead company, and should allocate time and resources during the audit to perform work on opening balances to reduce any risk of material misstatements in opening balances. See how I wrote my 6 marks answers in the live session within the stipulated time. You need to read the examiner article, right, for more understanding of the planning matters. The more understanding you gain, the better for you to write a 6 marks answer here. But I just focused on that because we were doing the first year audit. I need to be more concerned about the screening results and how screening results can help me. I need to have more knowledge of business and how more knowledge of business can really help me, and opening balances. Can you see the way I wrote the answer? I was not writing a point generically. I was just trying to relate that point with the first year audit, or I was just trying to relate how this point will benefit me in the first year audit. Have you see that have you feel that tone, that I was linking every point with the benefit to the first year audit, or how this point will really help me in the first year audit? Have you seen the tone of my writing answer? Right now, one final thing. See, I wrote here in the opening balances that the audit firm should carefully plan work on opening balances, and when you need to do some work on opening balances, you need to allocate time allocation is also part of planning, right? Resources, allocating resources is also part of planning, right? And we've already included the previous auditor, right? And the information the previous auditor must have given us about risky areas. The previous auditor must have given us a lot of insights about the risky areas. So we've already covered that as part of the specific matter in the opening, in the first year planning. Now, just a summary that ends my 6 marks answer, just to be preparing you for planning matters. Whenever you're looking at planning matters, irrespective of irrespective See, whenever we do planning, whenever the auditor do planning, the very important thing in planning first is to gain knowledge of business. But this knowledge of business becomes real important if it is the first year audit. Do everyone agrees with this? Knowledge, without knowledge you cannot do planning, right? But do you believe planning and knowledge becomes real important in the first year audit? Because in the recurring audit you will already have knowledge. Is that true? So do you believe that knowledge of business is a very important planning matter for the first year audit, more important than a recurring audit? It will not be a very important matter in a recurring audit, right? It will be a very important matter in the first year audit. Then what else you do whenever the auditor do planning? Auditor do planning for what? Whenever the auditor do planning, the auditor needs to plan for what? The auditor needs to plan for scope. The auditor needs to plan for timings. The auditor needs to plan for direction. And the auditor needs to plan for resources. See, I did use that in the opening balances. If you are doing the first year audit, you should plan for your scope. The scope includes adherence to laws and regulations. Adherence to laws and regulations. Scope includes opening balances. Now, do you all believe that the scope of the first year audit is more significant than the scope of a recurring audit? Can I get an answer to that quickly? Do you believe scope of the first year audit is definitely more than the scope of a recurring audit? So we need to adhere to laws and regulations for the first time. And you need to gain knowledge of the laws and regulations for the first time. You have no knowledge about the TED laws and regulations because you're doing audit of the TED for the first time, right? So your scope becomes significant because you need to do lots of things for the first time. But if you start to repeat things, second year, third year, fourth year, fifth year, there is an efficiency curve, and the efficiency curve reduce your work. So do you believe the amount of work you do in the first year audit is the same to the amount of work you do in the fifth year audit? The amount of work you do in the first year audit is the same to the amount of work you do in the fifth year audit? No. The first year audit requires a significant amount of work because you're new. And when you're new, you need to learn a lot. You need to explore a lot. You need to understand a lot, right? So scope, plan for scope, plan for timings. Do you think that there is a need to set a timetable more importantly in the first year audit than in a recurring audit? We should allocate time, need to set a timetable to meet the deadlines given by the management. So do you believe first year audit has a more importance of setting a timetable than a recurring audit and meeting the deadlines? Directions, need to identify the risky areas, and resources, need to allocate more experienced resources in the first year audit. Do you all believe this is correct, that I need to allocate more experienced resources in the first year audit? Because the risk is high in the first year audit, right? The first year audits are risky because I have less knowledge of business. So will I be allocating more juniors in my first year audit, or will I be allocating more experienced people in my first year audit? So which is a better strategy for the first year audit? Taking more inexperienced people or taking more experienced people? So can you relate this with the TED company answer? Apart from the points I wrote, I wrote a 6 marks answer, but if you want to change the answer, can you relate this with the TED company, the points I've just given you? So has this really given you an insight of the planning matrix? And will you all be reading the article of the examiner? So we have reached the third question, right? We have reached the third question, right? And if any questions of yours have been unattended, please put them on the WhatsApp group so they can be responded over the day tomorrow or day after tomorrow, because obviously it's humanly impossible responding to each and every questions. So I hope this question has given you an insight. This was the June 15 question, right? The third one we were doing. And this question asks us the specific matters we should be focusing on in the initial audit. I hope you're realizing that how important these marks are in the first question, apart from the typical marks which comes on risk and procedures. And I believe that you've never done justice with these marks in your prior exam settings. I'll be looking for the feedback for that, right? Okay, just starting another one, and we'll continue that in the session tomorrow, because the day tomorrow is also for the question number 1, so nothing to worry about. We need to do all question number 1s tomorrow, and we're already on the track, so we'll pace up things tomorrow. This was just the first day where we need to discuss so many other things apart from the question number 1. And tomorrow we have all the 3 hours for question number 1. I'll be starting on with this question tomorrow, June 16, question number 1. Let's see what is an unusual thing in the June 16 question number 1, which is apart from risk and procedures. Okay, you look at this question, it has 3 requirements. In the one requirement, the question asks for audit risk, and the marks allocated to audit risk are 18, major chunk. Then there is ethical issues, which is another very common feature of the first question. Ethical issues, and the marks allocation is 8. So again, the major chunk of the question is going on risk and ethical issues. But then again, you have 5 marks on something very different, and you ignore these 5 marks. That could be a difference between you passing and failing the AAA paper. See what this question asks for. This question says, explain why analytical procedures are performed as a fundamental part of our risk assessment procedures at the planning stage. Why we perform analytical procedures as a fundamental part of our risk assessment procedures at the planning stage. We have 5 marks, and I've just given you the marking scheme, right? That the knowledge marks are divided by 2. So technically we need to write 3. 3. Why? Analytical procedures are performed as a fundamental part of our risk assessment procedures at the planning stage. Not a difficult question if you think what the examiner is asking. He's asking that why analytical procedures are such an important risk assessment procedures at the planning stage. What benefit you get out of this? This is June 16, right? Question number 1A. Let's plan this for today, and let's see if we can complete that or carry forward this to the session tomorrow. This is June 2016. Question number 1, and looking at the part A. This is for 5 marks, divided by 2 per point. So technically we're writing 3 points here, 3 points in the answer. And the question is asking for explain why analytical procedures are fundamental part of risk assessment procedures. Risk assessment procedures. Why analytical procedures? I've just given you the breakdown of analytical procedures, right? You know what analytical procedures are: budgets, industries, ratios, trend analysis. Now the examiner is asking why analytical procedures are a fundamental part of risk assessment procedures, and you need to give in 3-point answer here in a very proper paragraph form, right? So just think about why APs are fundamental part of the risk assessment procedures. Why? So we need to answer the why, right? This question is 5 marks, multiplied by 1.95 is equal to how much time we have to do this in exam paper quickly. If I can see the answers on screen, 5 multiplied by 1.95 is equal to how much time? Okay, 9.75 minutes we have to do it, into 1/4 time, 1/4 time which goes on planning. So out of 9.75, okay, 2.43 minutes will go on planning. So how much net time we have for writing the answer? 9.75 minus 2.43. How much time we are left with writing of the answer? 7.31. Okay, 7.31 minutes to write the answer. Not difficult, just 3 points. 3 points and 7 minutes, 7.5 minutes to write the 3 marks, to write a 5 marks answer is not a bad equation. But are you realizing the time management even, which I just set at the beginning of the day 1 today? Are you realizing that? Are you realizing the need to multiply with 1.95 and then deducting the 1/4 time in reading and planning? Will this really be helping you? If I can just have a quick feedback when into the dying moments of the day 1. So your feedback should be very quick and spontaneous. Is this multiplication with 1.95, then deducting the 1/4 is helping you planning how much you are writing? And is everyone sound that when you get a knowledge question in the first requirement, you need to divide it by 2, right? So we are in continuation of the journey. June 16, I'll start the session tomorrow from here, June 16, and I'll be writing the answer for June 16 tomorrow in my session. And that means that when I begin my session tomorrow, I'll be beginning it from June 16, because tomorrow I'll directly start from question 1. Today I had to spend time on building the fundamentals even, but tomorrow that means I'm starting tomorrow from June 16 And we go to March, June 19, and we'll be looking at September 18, June 18, December 17. So we need to focus on six question number ones tomorrow. One of them is partially done. We'll start with analytical procedures from June 16 tomorrow. I'll hope you'll search for the answer by tomorrow for the June 16 question number one. Please drop in your feedbacks for the session today. It's almost end of the time, so I'll need to see you live tomorrow on day two, where the agenda still is the question number one, still is the untouched area. So you'll be exploring a lot more in the 3 hours tomorrow. Quickly drop in your feedback for how the session was today. And when the session ends, in front of your screen, you will get a feedback form immediately. Please fill in the feedback form very carefully and do provide ACCA Pakistan with valuable insights of these webinars. And just on the screen in front of you, if you can drop the feedback for the session today, helping me evaluate how has been the session today. So day one tomorrow, day two tomorrow, with the same agenda, looking at the question number one. I hope you had a productive session today, and it's time to say you goodbye and sign off from the first day and meet you tomorrow with the day two. Goodbye and Allah Hafiz.